till Friday. And no college or NFL football, no NBA or NHL, and yet no baseball playoffs. What about growing the game for our kids?
It is! MLB attendance was up again this year.
So why soccer the most popular youth sport?
Hey everyone, this is Will O'Toole for Park Ridge Sports History, welcoming you to another edition of Sports History. And this week, in addition to, I guess, venting about the fact that there were no baseball playoffs on a Friday night when there was nothing on TV in terms of sports. I mean, not that I minded, but I was watching women's volleyball, a little bit of college soccer, and some highlights from past glories of the New York Yankees and the Mets. There was no baseball to be had. Nothing. Nada. Nunca. Niet. And yet, baseball, which had really about 3 of the 4 playoffs, and of course the Reds went down 2-0. They got swept by the Dodgers, and that wasn't even as close as that. They were just taken apart by the Dodgers, the Big Blue. But the Detroit series was exciting against Cleveland. The Yankee series, of course, the Red Sox, it's always going to be electrifying. And of course, Chicago, San Diego ended in what would be, I think, is going to develop next year towards more AI, or what I should say, the robo-ump. And unfortunately, I actually feel sorry for the umpires. And it is, to me, just a couple of hypocrisies right now. If they have the technology, why aren't they employing it, right? If they can set up all kinds of, I don't know, tech during the game, and they refer to a camera or camera angles on controversial calls, why not just go the full 100 yards and just put in robo umpires behind the plate at first base, second, and third? I'd like to know what baseball's excuse is for that, or the reason that they keep flesh and blood making the judgment calls. Maybe it's the fact that baseball really doesn't want to go that extreme. Maybe they really don't want Hal as their ultimate arbiter for all games, 162 times 30 teams, and then you have the playoffs and the World Series. The controversial call, it was borderline, it was close. You don't know about the box against the San Diego batter and the Chicago pitcher. It wasn't way outside like the Florida Marlin Atlanta Brave game of years past, where the balls were, in the next county over on some of the pitches. And they were just too close to take. And really, the Padres have no one to blame but themselves, because they should have been probably a higher seed, albeit they probably could have won the West. Now, I am not excusing umpires at all. Some of their calls, I guess, controversial as they may be, were off. But the umpires do a pretty good job. I mean, it's a 95 plus rating. And yes, I know it's the tough calls that you got to get 150% right. But nonetheless, I see this. You can track all kinds of people using all kinds of technology. Why you can't put some sort of technology, and I'm against it. I'm all against this. I love the human element of baseball. Maybe Rob Manfred and the owners and the players still like the fact that you can bicker and bellow at the umpires. I don't know. Maybe that's good for the theater of the game, and that you can't do that with, like I said, Hal, the computer behind home plate. But as far as the technology, I'm just curious why they don't go full throttle into it. Baseball and all sports are having, I think, this real problem. Just, you know what? If you complain about the umpires enough, then just get rid of them and just bring in computers to do the games. And then everything will be black and white. There's no gray. There's no reason to argue or discuss or debate. And I think that's part of the beauty of sports, is that we can go the next day and be the Monday morning quarterbacks on Tuesday and argue and debate and question plays, calls, situations that just happened the previous night in one of the games, whether it's football or baseball, basketball, etc. But baseball is going to come to a real it's going to be a real problem in the future, where if you're using the technology and you're only using it halfway, I think the demand is going to be just go full blown 100% and just make these, I guess, into computerized games where the umpire is going to be some sort of IBM computer and you just move on. All right. I did do my little vent there. I've been enjoying the baseball playoffs. I did I guess I went with the Yankees to win the whole thing. Still, the Dodgers seem to be the prohibitive favorites. I was just happy that Cincinnati Reds got in there on the last day, albeit they kind of backed in, losing, as did the Mets, who also lost. But the Reds had the tiebreaker, plus they had the better record with 83 wins. They finished 83 and 81 if you count the 2 playoff losses. But for this team, which has not been in the playoffs for about half a decade, it is an improvement. I think they got the manager that they need in Francona. In fact, at the end of the game in the press conference, he had stated how much he really loved these players. And one of the things that was so significant was the fact that at meetings, they were always on time. Never any excuses. And I think that's what he liked most about this team was the fact, hey, maybe they're not the most talented just yet, but they had no excuses. They played hard. And for a guy who kind of worried about them making the playoffs, I had my brother Jim say, no, they're good. They're good. I think they're good enough to make it. Now, we both agreed they weren't good enough to maybe get to the World Series or maybe into the championship round. But the fact that you're making these little steps is so important. They have a nice pitching staff so they can avoid injuries. They need a heavy hitter, though, the Reds. And I'm telling you right now, I would love to see them get a guy like Alonso and just hit 30 home runs. Imagine him in the Great American Ballpark. He'd probably mash about 50 home runs, even at, quote unquote, his advanced age of 30 plus years. 30, 31, I think he's going to be next year. But with the speed that the Reds have, and just having that big bat in the middle of the line. Do you realize the Reds, I don't think, had a guy over 80 RBIs on this team, nor did they have a guy, I think, with more than 25 home runs. I don't even think they had a guy with 25 home runs. So many a time they scored 20 runs early in the year, and that was after being shut out, I think, in 3 consecutive or 3 or 4 games to start the season. Then they unloaded on Baltimore Orioles, scoring 22 runs. They didn't do that again, and rarely did they have double-digit wins, and or double-digit run wins. And when they did, it was like, wow, it was feast or famine. Then they went days out in the desert of lack of offense, not finding the oasis for 6 or 7 runs. So it was a fun year for the Reds, but also kind of frustrating. But the work is cut out. We know, as Reds fans, we know what the team has to do, and hopefully they'll go out and get a hitter. They'll shore up probably their pitching staff. I always worry about relief pitchers because I look at them as field goal kickers. The only one you never had to worry about are 2 guys. Actually, 3 guys I'll put in the realm you never really had to worry about were Mariano, Raleigh Fingers, Dennis Eckersley, and I'll put a 4th up there, Bruce Sutter. Those are the 4 guys that always just seem to be consistent every year. I know that relief pitchers, if you take a look, they have their up years and their down years. They're up here, and it's almost like you got to catch them at the right moment. And the Reds do have a guy, Pagan, who's pretty good in the pen. But as I said, now I worry, is he going to have the same kind of year next year as he did this year? And to me, being as I am, I'd go out and see if I can beef up more of my relief staff. Although their relief pitching was very good at the end of the year. Anyway, enough on the Reds because this is a New York metropolitan area. The Yankees, I got to be honest with you, I know I watched the game yesterday. It's almost like this. They played their worst game actually in about 2 weeks, because I know they lost a few games and all the rest of it. Thought they played pretty well against the Red Sox. Didn't score that many runs. They didn't score anything. Well, they had the one run double by Volpe, and he scored and get beat 10-1. But it's almost as if that game was done when it was like 2-0, 3-0. It just felt like the Yankees weren't going to win, and the Blue Jays were. Then they tacked on the runs late in the game to really seal the deal. I expect the Yankees to bounce back, and I actually expect them to win this round against Toronto. And I actually really I'm envisioning another Yankee-Dodger World Series, because I got to be honest with you, I watched the Dodgers against the Reds. Now, it was against the Reds, but man, they are so deep. And in this day and age, to be so deep, especially with your pitching core. And the biggest play last night was Ohtani striking out Schwarber. I knew that was going to be the play. They're up 3-0. If he comes through there, gets maybe a hit, drives in a run or two, game was over. Instead, that was the turning point in the game in my mind, because then the Dodgers rally, came back, eventually tie it, and then win the game. Anyway, again, enough with my venting about the playoffs and the lack thereof, seeing the games on a Friday night when I could have stayed up all night, didn't have to worry. I'd like to talk a little bit about my other favorite passions, and that is just the artistry or artwork in sports. Particularly, I love the college football helmets, and I have devoted past episodes on my favorite logos. And of course, now I'd like to do it on my favorite football helmets in college football. And I picked about 11 schools that I thought about, and I kind of started from the top, from Maine, went down the East Coast. Then I went westward, went through the Big Ten, the Southeast Conference, the Big 12, what used to be the Big 8. I was thinking about that. Went through the Rocky Mountains and the Mountain West. Then I went to the Pac-10, and I came up with about 11 helmets, and I did forget one in this whole thing. So that's just to go on record. I love the Miami U, not because I'm my Miami fan, but because as one, and I saw this recently on the show, and this kind of, ironically, this is what gave me the inspiration for this show, was they were talking about when Howard Schellenberger went in there. And you got to remember that University of Miami was really down in the late 70s. And he takes over the program. And one of the things that he kept, he loved the U on the helmet. He says, we're going to make this fashionable. We're going to make this well-known and all the rest of it. Well, many people don't remember it was Schellenberger who won that classic 84 Orange Bowl, in which Nebraska goes for 2, which they had to do. They couldn't settle for a tie. People always think that Nebraska was gutsy going for the 2. They had to go for the 2. They were prohibitive favorites against Miami, even though the game was played in the Orange Bowl. At the time, the Big 8's home game, let's say, was the Orange Bowl. That was really kind of reserved for them for quite a few years. And he had to go for 2. Schellenberger winds up winning the game 31-30. The quarterback at the helm was Bernie Kosar. When you look at that game, you see a ton of athletes, not just on the Nebraska side who went to the NFL or the Canadian Football League, but on the Miami level side as well. And I'm just thinking out loud right now, you had Bernie Kosar, Turner Gill, who would go on to coach college football at Buffalo, and then I think he went to his alma mater, Nebraska. You had Mike Rozier, who had won the Heisman. So you had a number of great players involved in that game. And Schellenberger kept the U. And then Miami started to really have success in the 80s and 90s, not just winning one championship, but several championships under a number of coaches, Jimmy Johnson, Dennis Erickson, and others. So they kept the U. And of course, when you see the U, it is, when you're looking at it with the green and the orange, and that's another thing that sets it off with the white background of the helmet. And I will go and tell you this. I like the light colored helmets so that you can see the logo that much better, whether it's gold or white or let's say, I don't know, maybe a offshoot of gold or offshoot of white. But it always looks to me better, the logo on a white or a yellow background. Not as good in the blue, but there are exceptions. And actually, those exceptions also did make my list. Now, look, you don't have to like any of my selections. Some of these I've done because they're iconic, the helmets. Some I did because I just love the history behind the new look. Some of them I find interesting or artistic. You may have different ones, but nevertheless. And I'm just going to start. I was going to put this in a top 10 or a top 11, but since I only did 10 schools, or 12 schools I actually did. I did 12 schools, and one was not the University of Miami. I originally had this down to about 15 or 20, and then just for time's sake, I wanted to cut it down. So I'm not going to do it in any order of 1 through 10. That'll leave up to you. And I know that people are going to differ with me. Some people, and I can say this now, the Penn State all white with just the blue band down, many people love it. I personally love it because it's so simple and it's so characterized Penn State. But many people just hate it because there's no decoration on it. It's like putting up a Christmas tree and just leaving it there with no lights, no Christmas ornaments, no tinsel, nothing. And it works, though, sometimes. It does. But in this case, I don't know. There's going to be a lot of fans who just say it's got to be a little bit more on that. And I will tell you this, back in the early 70s when I first started watching football, and sometimes Penn State today does do, quote unquote, a throwback helmet. They'll put the numbers of the players on the helmet, which looked pretty cool. Nothing novel. I mean, Alabama has it. A number of teams have it. And but the Penn State, and I'll also tell you this, when I was going to high school, my high school also patterned or looked just like the Penn State uniform. In fact, it probably had fewer stripes on the uniform than the Penn State one did. But it worked. Our team won because they played on Astro dirt. No sod, no grass, not even lawn care on it. It was just mud by the middle of September because it was being used by everybody at Seton Hall. So it was just incredible. But anyway, let's get to one of the more traditional teams, and that's Michigan, Big Ten. 1938. And I didn't know this, and that's why I love doing this show, because it does force me to do some research, deep diving. Chris Chrysler, of which the Chrysler building, where the basketball arena is named after him, brought it from Princeton. Now, Chrysler, I was doing a little deep dive on him. He was an All-American at the University of Chicago, then started coaching first in Princeton. And Princeton originally had the stripes. So he brought that with him to Michigan. Now, I love the Michigan helmet for a number of reasons. Outside of maybe a number of teams copying it, and of course Princeton uses it, and so does the Delaware Blue Hens. My brother always told me, he said, doesn't it kind of look either like the back of a Wolverine animal with the striping, or a claw? And actually what really caught my attention was when he said a claw, because if you look at the helmet, it does look like a claw. So I've always liked it. Michigan, of course, Chrysler does go on to win championships at Michigan in 33, 35, and 47. Now, again, when I first started watching college football, Michigan had gone through some tough times in the 50s and 60s. The Big Ten was dominated by Ohio State, probably more than any other team in the 50s and 60s. And then Bo Schembechler, who was one of Woody Hayes' proteges, comes in there, wins in 1969 in an upset, and then the Michigan tradition. And what we've grown to look forward to every year, the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry, was born really when Bo Schembechler became head coach, because they did have some down times there. Probably one of the most noteworthy games between Ohio State and Michigan was the tie in 1973, 10-10. That was a grueling game, played on a cold December day. And then it was Michigan who was selected to go to the Rose Bowl, because they had all kinds of tiebreakers. They really had to go in, and the Big Ten Commission and the voting chamber of the football wing of the Big Ten had to vote which one would represent them, Michigan, Ohio State, and at the end it was Michigan. So Michigan goes in, as probably one of the iconic helmets. They've never changed it since, I think, 38. In fact, as I said, to change it would be like getting rid of the Yankee pinstripes for a regular season game. Really would. Now, Notre Dame, how can you pass up? Well, let me go to Ohio State since I mentioned that. In 1967, now the Ohio State gray and red helmet with the red striping, it's okay. What adds definitely to that helmet are the Buckeye stickers. And I didn't know this. They're only one of 13 FBS schools, and I didn't get a list. I'll get that next week, that hand out stickers for games. But they do it in a pretty strategic way. They were introduced by Woody Hayes in 67. And in 1968, of course, he wins a national championship, his last one. Hayes won in 54 with an undefeated Buckeye team. And then in 68, he defeats O.J. Simpson and USC in the 69 Rose Bowl to win his second championship. And of course, Hayes had an unfortunate ending in the Gator Bowl of 1978-79 season, and we'll just leave it at that. But Hayes brings in, he actually talked to his trainer, Ernie Biggs, and he wanted to enhance the look. So they thought of stickers and based it on the Buckeye tree. And if you take a look, the simplest way to draw it, it looks like an asterisk. The thing with the Ohio State is that it was done this way. You can only collect them for making big plays. The team can collect them, one sticker, by winning a game. But the team, since it's a team sport, I saw this in an article in the Sporting News 2025, the non-conference are worth one sticker, but if you win a conference game, it's worth two stickers. And maybe even, especially for Michigan, you might get an added one there. And there are one of 13 FBS schools that incorporate a sticker for a sign of a good play or a win, etc. So it's kind of cool. And this is what you remember, too. If you watch the Rose Bowl, you could always tell who the great players were by the number of stickers they had, and they would fill up the one side, then start the other. Or sometimes what the guys would do, even today, they would put stickers on opposite sides and build up the stickers from the back to the front. So it was kind of cool. Each one had their own sticker, I guess, tradition, the players themselves, but you could always mark a starter or a great player by the number of stickers he had on his helmet. Now, here's an interesting one. The West Virginia Mountaineer. It's called, I didn't know this, the Flying WV. And it started in the late 70s. Bobby Bowden, that coach there, had turned the program into a winner from about 1970 to 75 or 75. Then he leaves for Florida State and starts them into a real championship mode every year type of school. After he left, the West Virginia felt it, and they had some losing seasons, actually 4 in a row from 76, 79. Now comes on board is Don Nehlen, who they had a very successful tenure as the West Virginia coach. In fact, Nehlen brought them to the Fiesta Bowl and the national championship title game back in the 88-89 season. When he had Major Harris as quarterback, he brings undefeated West Virginia against undefeated Notre Dame. And the game was close, but Notre Dame, just by attrition and tradition, defeated West Virginia to win their last national championship. We're still waiting for the 21st century championship in South Bend. But anyway, here's what happens. Nobody could decide who actually came up with the West Virginia logo. The WV that's shaped in such a way it looks like the mountains of West Virginia. It's really, I love it because, and yes, it's on a dark background, but it's gold lettering, so it really does stand out. And nobody wants to take credit for, let's say, the final drawing or the final illustration of the WV. Now, several people were involved, let's say, in the evolution to the WV. There was Mike Curran, the equipment manager. There was Mike Parsons, the SID. And then lo and behold, they tried to do some of their own versions of a new look, and none of them could draw. So what happens is they run into a fella, or are introduced to a fellow by the name of John Boyd Martin, who happens to be a graphic artist who has no association with the school per se of West Virginia, other than the fact, and I guess this is a huge deal, his brother Dick Martin, not of Martin, Ronan Martin, but Dick Martin, his brother, would be the AD at West Virginia. Anyway, this guy, John Boyd Martin, starts working on a design. And this guy was into sports designs. When I was looking at his record, he was a graphic artist, did the World Series, did Major League Baseball All-Star, did the NBA All-Star Game, did some work for the Kansas City and Atlanta Braves, and of course the New York Mets. So I can bring this back to our fans here at Park Ridge Sports, New York Met fans. Lo and behold, and they come up with the WV. It's kind of cool because they had many versions of it, but I do love the version that they have currently on their helmet. Now, I know they go back and do retro helmets and all the rest of it, but this one really does stand out. And if you take a look, West Virginia has had pretty good success with it. Like I said, they finally played for a championship. They were close in 92, but got upset by Pitt in a regular season Big East game. It kind of fell hard for them. They had two great running backs. Steve, I think Smith, to me, was a Heisman Trophy candidate, but they struggled against Pitt, and of course Pitt was okay. I think they may have been 8-3, maybe 9-2 tops that year, but they upset them in the backyard brawl. And for West Virginia, it really represented the last time they were major players for a title game. So that is West Virginia. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Florida State really got caught up with just the designs of the helmets for Florida State. So I didn't do, quote unquote, any kind of research on who did the spears. But I can tell you this. I love the spears with the red background and the golden arrows. Very similar, if not mimics, the old Washington Redskin uniforms from the late 60s, 68 and 69. Remember Sonny Jurgensen? Just over center with one bar for a face guard, and you'd see, and he had a paunch belly, so it looked like he was coming out like a weekend warrior being their quarterback. He was great, though. He was a great quarterback. Anyway, he had the spears. I loved them. I loved the maroon on them. They were both detailed and at the same time, very simple. When Spurrier would take over the realm, over the helms of Washington, the Redskins, he would reintroduce that, but it was a little bit more detailed. I like the simpler version of 69. To me, Florida State's spear is kind of a combination of those, but I think it lends itself more to the Washington Redskin look of 69. Now they have white helmets with it. They have the gold helmets with it. And sometimes they have the red. I think I like the gold background on that one the best. And, of course, they've had success with it. They've had previous ones. I'm going to show you some of them. They had Florida State written up there. They had tomahawks, kind of a silhouette of a tomahawk. It was not well done. But I think this one, when you see it, it's kind of cool. It does hearken to the state of Florida and its American Indian heritage. So it's great stuff. And of course, really, it's Bobby Bowden who introduced all of that. Now, Notre Dame, before I forget, they've never changed. They have put shamrocks on it on occasion just lately. And they also had in the early or the late 50s, early 60s, they had a shamrock. But really, when you think of golden domes or you think of gold helmets, right away you think of Notre Dame because they do sprinkle actual gold, I guess you would call them gold chips into them. And that started in 1950. They called it the painting of the helmet with gold. It is a tradition there to be able to do that. If you're one of the equipment managers, it's really something of honor and of privilege. And of course, Notre Dame has on campus the Golden Dome. And so that's why they have the nickname the Golden Domers. But I did want to tell you this. I didn't realize this. The leprechaun that we see today, looking like this, with its two fists in the air, that came about in 1964, and that was done by a sports illustrator by the name of Theodore Drake. He got paid the princely sum of $50 Before that, and I didn't know this, and I should have known this, but I didn't. But now I'm glad I do know this. They had as their mascot an Irish Terrier that was donated to them by a Notre Dame fan, I believe from Cleveland. So every year, like you have the Uga, the Bulldog, Bevo, the Longhorn, etc., you have the Irish Terrier back in the 30s that would strut the sidelines for the Irish. All right. Now, one of my favorites, and it's a classic, is the Tiger Paw of Clemson. First of all, I love orange as a color for a team. I think it's kind of cool. The fella that introduced that was head coach Hootie Ingram. He wanted to change the feeling, the look, the attitude of the team's image. So he put that tiger paw on the helmet. And of course, the rest has been history. I mean, how many high school schools imitate that? And with each one, it's really cool. Heck, there have been even some other colleges that have copied that look. And I tell you, it's incredible. Now, I don't like when they do the purple helmets. I like the orange helmets. I think it really shines beautifully on that. I also like the tiger paw on their uniforms. I actually like the orange jersey, not the purple jersey, although their colors are purple and orange. I just think it stands out. And when you think of Clemson, you think of Clemson orange. And what's really cool is that apparently when you drive down to Clemson, and although I was in South Carolina this summer, I was not over by Clemson. I think the road that you take in to take you to Clemson, there are tiger paws, orange tiger paws, painted on the highway. This can only be in college. And that's why there's such great tradition in college football. So that's the Clemson logo. And then it leads me to this, the Longhorns, Texas Longhorns. Now, it used to be Hook 'em Horns. That was popular in the late 60s when they had those undefeated teams. 1969, they were great. 1970 and 71. The Hook 'em Horns with Darrell Royal. He wanted to change the look as well of the team. And you got to remember, it was Royal who introduced the wishbone. So you could say that Longhorn, a silhouetted Longhorn on the side of their helmet, almost looks like a wishbone. What was cool for me was that when football was celebrating its 100th anniversary, college football, in 1969, right? Remember that the roots of football go to 1869, Rutgers playing the first game. They had some of the teams would took the decal of a football with 100 in it and put it on their helmet. Well, I thought Texas did it the best because between the horns of the Longhorn was the football, and with number 100 in there representing the 100th year. I always thought that looked cool, even though I couldn't stand Texas. It still made for a memorable, I can still remember it, helmet. So that was the Longhorns. And of course, Notre Dame lost to them in the 69 in the 70 Cotton Bowl late. Theismann had a pass intercepted, or else they could have ended their winning streak. But they did get revenge in 71 when they manhandled the Longhorns, and then would beat them in 78 for or 77 season. They would beat them in the 78 Cotton Bowl, manhandling the Longhorns 38-10, and their Heisman Trophy winner, running back. Well, he ran for 100 yards, but it was like they gave him the 100 yards, and that was it. They stopped every other facet of their game. It wasn't even close. It was 38-10, and it wasn't even that close. Man, sometimes I can remember all that, and yet I can't remember to take out the garbage when my wife's asked me to 2 minutes ago. All right. Now, another logo I like, the Arkansas Razorback, although I wish they would make it a little bit larger on their helmet. Not too large. That's the problem. If you ever see Boise State, they had a nice logo with the outline of Idaho and a Bronco, and then they blew that up, and now they wear it on one side with the number on the other, and it's in gray, and you can't really see it, and it kind of looks like a mishmash. But Arkansas has that great Razorback, and why I love the logo, it's very simple. It's on a red background. I have seen it, I think, on the white, but I guess for tradition's sake and the fact growing up, again, this is my personal preference. I do like the red helmet with the white Razorback, and I love the fact that you can see kind of the razors in the Razorback. I just wish they would make the logo bigger, and I didn't realize it made a number of transformations. Didn't also know this. They were originally known as the Cardinal, but in 1909, their head coach, Hugo Bezdek, Bezdek, referred to the team as a wild band of Razorback hogs after a win over big rival LSU. And in 1931 is the debut of the red and black hog. Pretty cool. And it is a cool looking hog. And it has, I tell you, great marketing by the Razorback administration, athletic administration, because sometimes you'll see the fans at the stadium, they have helmets or I guess caps in plastic of the Razorback front, his face on it, and they wear that around, and it's go Razorbacks, and they yell out "Suey," all that kind of stuff. It's just great fun at the football games. So kudos to the Arkansas Razorback. I have yet to see another team in college or even in high school have a nickname called the Razorbacks or the Hillbillies. Then I'd like to say this. I didn't realize, again, that Washington State Cougar logo on their helmet when they use it, I think is absolutely brilliant, because the W, S, and U all form the profile of a cougar. And I think that is so cool. So it's the W, the S, and the U. The U forms the jawbone. It's in gray. Sometimes they wear the gray helmets with the red. Again, I know I'm going against what I said. I actually prefer the red helmet with the gray lettering rather than the gray background with the red. It's just how I perceive it, how I first saw it, and all the rest of it. But I didn't know that logo goes all the way back to 1936. I thought it was something brand new. Let's say in the last 25, 30 years. It's not. It was by an art student on campus by the name of Randy Johnson, who designed it for the college. Pretty cool. And the last three, I got about a minute for each, but I'd like to spend. I have the Sun Devil. Now, not the one with the spear, the trident today. That's okay. And why I really don't like it is because it took away from the other Sun Devil. And that was literally, it was a cartoon version of a devil with the horns running with a trident, running along. And it was on a gold helmet. This was in red. And I do believe it either said ASU or Sun Devils. But they used to wear that when they were in the mountain. And then when they first joined the Pac-10 or Pac-8 to become the Pac-10 with Arizona. And I just remember John Jefferson. I do remember the Fiesta Bowl in which they knocked off Nebraska. And they were just a cool team. And actually, that Sun Devil, his nickname is Sparky. Originally, the school started off as Tempe Normal School, but post-World War II, 1946, they adopt the Sun Devil. It's not an animal, plant, or person. It's actually an atmospheric phenomenon, which I did not know. A Sun Devil is basically a desert tornado of high winds and, of course, spins around. Hence, they're called Sun Devils. And, of course, my last two, the Air Force one, I just simply loved. I have grown accustomed to the new one or the new look. It's more colorful. They have the striping going down the middle of the helmet. But the original one lasted for about 15, 16 seasons, 1958 to 63. The Air Force, it was the Hap Arnold wings. It was inspired by a photograph of Prime Minister Winston Churchill's V for Victory gesture. And, of course, it looks like lightning bolts. It's not the Charger lightning bolt. The lightning bolts come at you, and if you see it, and I have pictures of it, front and side version. I love it. It's simple. It's blue with the gray and the white. It's got the white background, which you love, so I can see the blue lightning bolts that much better. Of course, it's very emblematic, very symbolic of the Air Force Academy being up in the clouds, in the blue yonder, etc. And then the final one is Tulane. Now, Tulane was originally, their logo was a pelican named Riptide. Then it was Greenie. It was done by editorial cartoonist John Churchill. I have a picture of it. But then they changed to the Angry Wave, and that's been since 1964. That was commissioned by the AD Rix Yard, and I found this in the Tulanean fall of 2022. Don't know who actually drew the Angry Wave. The original sketches were by Eldon Endicott and Art Evans, who was the art director for Angelus Pacific Art. And Eldon Endicott was the manager of the Tulane bookstore. So when you see that green, and it's a cool one, I like it better than the T that they used to have. This one, when they stick it up there, plus they put it on their jersey. I just love it because it looks really weird. Yeah, it does look like a wave to some. Others, it looks like Gumby. And still, to me, it kind of looks like, I don't know, a flapjack coming out of the pan being folded over. Whatever, it's unique. It makes it cool. It makes it college football. And it makes a great ending note for this Park Ridge Sports History episode. Shout out to Howard for producing this show, and I'll see you next week with another edition. Thanks all. Bye now.